The Université Libre de Bruxelles. Welcome, guys.
Good evening, all. Hello, hello. And here is the plan. Two of us, as you can see, one candidate, live questions from that audience and from you at home. And as you'd expect here on Raw Politics, we've got our own unique take on some of the candidates, which you'll be seeing throughout tonight's programme.
But the most important thing about tonight, as always, is you, your questions and your reactions. So let's get over to Maven Jack at our social media hub, who is keeping an eye on all of that for us, guys.
Good evening.
Good evening. Well, throughout the night, we would absolutely love to hear from you, to see what you think of Violeta Tomic and what questions that you might have for her throughout the programme. What is the information to get in touch? Well, that might be the question you're asking yourself. It's right up here. You can email us at rawpol@euronews.com, or you can tweet, but always using the hashtag #RawPolitics.
We've teamed up with Facebook on this one. We're streaming there live. Leave your comments underneath and we'll be able to read them out during the show. If you use that hashtag #RawPolitics, we'll be able to bring up your tweets, your Facebook posts, your comments here on our board and send them over to Violeta Tomic on the couch, as long as you use that hashtag #RawPolitics.
All right, thank you, guys. So do get sending. You know, we're waiting for all that. All right, let's get started. She is the reason we are here tonight. Let us welcome the candidate for the Party of the European Left, Violeta Tomic.
Hello, nice to meet you. Hello.
Good to have you.
And hello, audience.
Take a seat there. Good evening.
Welcome to the program. Right, so, you know, in this whole race, few weeks to go till the elections, you're a newcomer, new face. Has it been tough? Has it been an uphill battle for you so far?
Yes, it's been tough, but I'm used on cameras and on studios, so it is a little bit easier.
A little bit easier. Well, there we go. Well, we'll have to get an idea of just who you are, where you've come from.
We'll be getting a lot of questions from our audience. Yeah, and we will be putting them to you throughout the program. All right, before we get to that, though, let us find out a little bit more about Violeta Tomic.
Meet Violeta Tomic, the unashamed outsider who wants to turn Europe to the left.
For Europe of the people, not capital.
Violeta Tomic grew up in what was the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia, but politics wasn't her first passion. It was the stage.
Splav je zločin, kontracepcija je zločin.
She studied acting at the University of Ljubljana and went on to perform at the city's theatre before venturing onto the small screen.
Ja. Violeta, hvala lepa. Ja, že sposobno. Vse je v redu, Violeta Tomic.
Slovenia became an independent state in 1991 and joined the European Union in 2004.
Benvenuti in Europa!
10 years later, Ms. Tomic took her first steps into politics, becoming a member of the Slovenian parliament.
Tako kot kolega Berlusconi in Sanader.
In 2018, she joined the Strasbourg-based Council of Europe, using her position there to champion LGBT rights. But now, hoping to swap Ljubljana and Strasbourg for Brussels, she wants Europe to bring about an alternative to capitalism, ramping up taxation. She wants to rid the world of nuclear weapons, and in Brussels, she wants to shake things up by increasing the power of the European Parliament and giving Europe's regions a greater say in decisions which are made here at the seat of EU power. Her brand of politics might just be too left-wing for Brussels, but this former actress is hoping to steal the spotlight in the race for Europe's top job.
It's not often we see an actor turn
an
politician, especially here.
Career. Does being an actor in some ways make you a better politician?
Well, sometimes people say that politics is a theater, and I cannot agree with it. Theater is a very serious art, but sometimes politicians, they act, actually. And when I entered the politics, one of colleagues, he told me that I will not survive because I always think what I'm talking about.
It's an unconventional path. I mean, do you see this as an advantage?
Not really, but it was my path. I had to go this way because I shared the destiny of precarious workers, and during the austerity time, I was on the street with them. So it just happens. Whenever they ask me about opinion, I spoke loudly about social injustice, and so they said, yes, we need your your word, we need your voice in Parliament.
Social injustice is certainly an issue that resonates with a lot of European voters. Okay, so we have been, over the past few weeks, asking you to send in your questions, what issues matter to you that we can put to our candidates by everything from video to WhatsApp to Facebook, Twitter, email, and more. So many ways to get in touch. So let us get our first audience question of the evening from Sami Chauvet from the ULB University in Brussels. Sami, what is your question?
Hi, Violeta.
Hi.
So I have two questions, actually. My first question is, what are your propositions to fight tax evasion? And my second question is actually, what is your plan to introduce an European minimum wage? Thanks.
Okay, let's start with tax evasion there.
Yes, definitely. Tax evasions should be stopped immediately, because if we want to have social state and social justice, then it is unacceptable. We cannot tolerate that billions and billions of euros, which were earned doing business in Italy, Slovenia or Poland, were out in tax havens, and we necessarily need this money. So we propose also the tax for ultra-rich as well, and the common tax for corporations. And, of course, tax havens should be abolished.
But isn't the point, sorry, just on tax evasion, no one would disagree in principle.
Yes.
But practically, if you tax people more, they will simply move that money out of Europe.
And find
out
ways
of control.
to evade.
And isn't that the problem, that simply you will actually, by trying to tackle it, make it worse?
Yes, that's what neoliberals always say to us, you know. Then they will go and our jobs will go. Not, I don't think it is the case. With stigmatization of those who export their money to tax havens and to common will to tackle this problem, we can save it. Because if they are not paying taxes, then normally ordinary working people have to pay everything. So rich are becoming even more rich and poor are even more poor.
How will you get European nations in the EU in line with your proposals for, tackling tax evasion, to get them in line with tightening their tax laws so that it is not as attractive for companies to go to to those nations that have attractive tax incentives? How do you do that?
All corporations, they need some infrastructure as well. So they are not just gods from heaven to come somewhere and use, because somebody had to educate their workers. Some build the roads, some make infrastructure. So they have to pay something back. So why don't they make business, I don't know, if in Afghanistan, because it is impossible, in normal state. They have all infrastructure which were paid once before, so they have to pay
let's go
back.
to the second part of Sami's question there, minimum wage. What are you going to do? What is your plan for introducing minimum wage across the EU?
Yes, in Slovenia, we already supported majority government, and our first steps was the rising of minimum wage. And we think that it would be a good pattern for all European countries that we account minimum spends, how much one family needs or one person needs for the minimum costs of living. They are different in every country, of course, but minimum wage must be 20% over this minimum cost level. It will prevent to face with working poor people, because it is unacceptable that we have working people who works 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and they cannot survive with their salaries. It is something which has to be abolished, definitely.
But isn't the problem with that, just quickly on this, that irrespective of a minimum wage, because it'll be different, people will still, particularly in Eastern Europe, be attracted to come and live in Western Europe, where wages are so much higher. And emigration, people leaving places like Poland and Romania and Hungary, is very high because of that inequality. What you're proposing won't stop that.
Yes, it will, because it will prevent that competition between countries will not take a form of social dumping, because everybody could live with their wages on the place when they work and live.
Okay. Let's move on, because we want to hear more from you. We've got a video question now, actually. It comes from Silja in Finland. Let's have a look at that.
We're currently seeing an unprecedented movement of young people on the streets demanding urgent climate action. And my question to you would be, how would you go about to create urgent action across Europe on mitigation against climate change? And secondly, how would you get a shared commitment across the EU to fully implement the Sustainable Development Goals?
There we go, a question about climate change. What would you do?
Yes, it is very, very important question now. And I was on the street as well on climate justice demonstrations. And also I heard the Greta's speech in the European Parliament, and I couldn't agree more. Really, our house is falling apart, and it is definitely true. So we have to take urgent action about it. But what I have to admit is that, for my opinion and for opinion of European left, it is simply not possible in this system we have, in neoliberal capitalism, because it is following just unlimited growth and competition and no values about people and our planet. We have to change system because it doesn't
everyone from
work.
the broad spectrum of parties, what you would call the neoliberal groups, everybody seems to be concerned about the environment, and they are putting forth proposals to tackle climate change. You don't agree with that? You don't think they are?
No,
So what
I don't
will you do
think
differently? What will you do? What do you mean change the system? What does that mean?
It means that with neoliberal capitalism, you cannot really change the climate goals because it follows unlimited growth on the planet, which has some limits. So we have to establish new system which will put the people are the only thing what is really matter on this earth. And of course, the earth, the planet, not the profits, not money, not banks, but just people.
So on that point, you say urgent action needs to be taken.
Yes.
What action have you taken, personally?
Yes, we are proposing...
No, you personally. Do you drive a car?
Yes, on gas.
Do you take an aeroplane?
Yes, but I would propose that European Union invest in the joint fast railways. And we will not use so many airplanes.
But my question is, have you personally changed what you have done in response to this?
Yes, I did a lot. I never use plastic for one use, and I always use just one glass, not every, and plastic bags.
But that's not carbon emissions. What if, do you fly less?
These days, I don't fly less because I have to be in Brussels and all around Greece. But if the train will be faster, do you know how long it takes from Ljubljana center to my hometown Metlika? It is 120 kilometers. What do you think? How long I drive with the train? You have any idea?
2 hours.
An hour and a half?
3.5 hours.
A long time. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
so from Brussels to Strasbourg, I come quicker.
Yeah.
So I would like to introduce the program where we will have Green New Deal for Europe, and we will create a lot of green jobs and green infrastructure and public transport and everything.
Which would cost a lot
I think we've got
money.
another question, haven't we?
We do. So now let's go to a question from WhatsApp. It comes from Ali Riza Kurani in Ankara in Turkey, and he wants to know, what do you think about full membership for Turkey? This is a very relevant question, so what do you think about that?
Well, it is a hard question because we know that in Turkey, all opposition or a lot of members of opposition are in jail. Also, Kurdish people, some of them are members of our group in Parliamentary Assembly Council of Europe, when I'm a member, and I'm also the main rapporteur for LGBTI rights. And we have Lady Leila Guyen, who is a member of parliament, but she's on hunger strike. So since the violation of human rights are so strong in Turkey, I don't think I will agree with their full membership.
And what is the problem? Is it Erdogan?
Yes, I think so, yes.
So how would, as a Commission President, if you were to be, how would you deal with Turkey and Erdogan?
Because you will have to deal with him.
You will have to.
Yes, of course. We would talk about freedom of other parties which are not in favor of him, because that's democracy.
Okay.
What do you think? We have totalitarianism.
What do you think in response to that? We do want to hear from you. And on that note, let's go over to our social media hub now. Join Maeve and Jack, who've got an update for us. What are you hearing, guys, online?
Well, of course, we're streaming tonight's show on Facebook. So hello and thank you to all those watching us tonight on Facebook. We have rather critical comments coming in from Christian there. He says, Tomic is a socialist who is demonising the rich. The poor people are only a means to an end for this ideologue, he says. Well, will Christian and other people's minds be changed after this interview? Do let us know, Christian. Keep those comments coming in.
We have been seeing a lot of comments across Twitter. We've been asking people as well, what are their important issues for these European Parliament elections? For Ana Eldeco Ramirez, she says immigration, reactivating the economy and avoiding populism are the vital issues. Now, we've got a question on Facebook that we're going to bring up on the screen. It's coming from Galway in Ireland, from Naomi Dubois. She says, what practice would Violeta Tomic instate regarding the repatriation of a person who left their home country to join a terrorist organisation?
Jack, thank you very much. This is a very pertinent issue, isn't it? Particularly with people who've gone off to fight for the Islamic State. Do you think they should be brought back to Europe, or should they have their nationality denied?
Well, it is a really difficult question, because this climate we are facing now, when people are killing each other just because of different skin color or different religion, even in churches, it is terrible. And I don't know where the world is now, because 10 years ago it wasn't so. So probably the frustrations and aggressiveness is so high. But we have to admit that also NATO forces destroyed Iraq, and it was the start of Islamism and radicalism.
But I think this issue really worries voters, because these are European citizens that had left Europe, and they can come back by virtue of their nationality. But should they be allowed to come back after having joined a terrorist organization?
Yes, but they have to answer many questions, and maybe they will be put in jail for what they did.
It seems quite extraordinary. You seem to be saying that NATO are at least part responsible for the Islamic State.
Yes, definitely it is. Bombing of Iraq was on the fake issue. It's made like that they have to bomb Iraq because they have weapons for massive destruction, and at the end it was shown that it is not so. So we Europeans are also responsible to help with NATO to occupy and destroy Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan. What our troops were doing there.
So that justifies the actions of the Islamic State?
Nothing justifies the actions, but it is always the cause and consequences. If we will have peaceful politics, then we will have friends all around the world. Because I came from previous Yugoslavia, and we were the members of non-aligned movement. And still, I'm thinking that Europe has to be non-aligned.
Is it really that easy, though?
Okay, and we're going to be picking up on this issue of NATO a little bit later on. But let's pick up the pace now slightly, if we can. We're going to ask you some binary questions. They come with a yes or no answer. Nothing else, if that is OK. Is China a threat to the European Union? Yes or no?
No.
Is Russia a threat?
No.
Do you think that Strasbourg, us having to go there every month, is a waste of money?
Yes.
What about Bernie Sanders for US president? Yes or no?
Definitely yes.
Do you think that Facebook should be stronger and more regulated?
Yes.
Do you think Julian Assange should be extradited to face questions?
No.
Should Russia hand back Crimea?
I don't know, because it is their own matter. So it matters. I think they should make referendum again.
Pretty controversial, that one. I'm sure you've got views on that one at home, particularly if you live in Ukraine or indeed in Russia. And just finally, electric scooters. Are you a fan, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, have you tried it? There's another one.
No.
OK, well, if you have just joined us, just a reminder, you are watching Raw Questions, a special series of shows with the candidates for Europe's top job. And tonight we are joined by the European Left's candidate, Violeta Tomic. And we do want to put your questions to her, so all of the contact details are on your screen. You can get in touch on Facebook. We're streaming live there. And you can also email us. And don't forget to tweet using the hashtag #RawPolitics. But before we put any more questions to Violeta Tomic, it is time for tonight's You Said It. It features Ms. Tomic's Politico's Maastricht debate last night. Let us take a look.
For the bankers and stockbrokers in Frankfurt and City of London, the last economic crisis is just a distant memory. But for the people of Europe, who pay this crisis with millions and billions of euros of austerity, effects are still here. All across Europe, working families are facing the same problem: how to pay the bills, how to assure the better future for their children. But the politicians in Brussels have time and time again put the interests of banks and corporations in front of interests of the people. And I'm not a Brussels insider like all these gentlemen here are.
Not being an insider, I think that's
yeah,
that's
indeed. But isn't
interesting.
this the problem with many would say with politicians on the left, is that they love bashing the banks, and yet to many people they employ people, and they generate an awful lot of wealth, and they pay taxes. Why do you like bashing the banks?
Well, as I told yesterday, during the economic crisis in 2008, we were saving the banks and funds. And to save them, we have to take the money from banks and funds to save them. So it impoverishes the state budgets so much, and it makes and all the money flow from the periphery to center, and from the poorest to the richest. So we saved the banks now, and they forgot that we were saving them at that time, and we had to recapitalize our banks in Slovenia, and then we have to sell them, no matter of price.
You're for actually nationalizing banks. I mean, will that idea actually fly in the EU? Just very quickly, nationalizing, making banks, making them public entities, as you've said before. I mean, will that actually fly? Would that idea sell in the EU?
Well, it is difficult to sell anything, but we about nationalization, okay, but definitely we have cooperative banks and public banks.
Okay. All right. Let's get another question from our audience now. It comes from Clara Juan from the ULB University as well. Okay, Clara, what would you like to ask?
Hello. I have a question on migration policy. So since the so-called migrant crisis, the EU has established various policies, such as the EU hotspot approach or agreement with Turkey or collaboration with Libya. So do you think that the EU migration policy respects the fundamental rights of migrants?
No, not at all. Europe fails on humanity because thousands and thousands of people are finishing their life in ocean, and we are just building the walls and buying more weapons even now, the world has enough weapons to destroy the planet 5 times. This is also about climate goals. And we are just producing and selling more and more weapons.
So what would you do about the migrants' crisis?
First, we have to solve the problem at the very origin. And first, we have to stop the wars because
okay, but
people
the ones
are
who are
running
already here.
from... The ones who are already here, we have to work with them, to give them the lessons, language lessons, and to integrate them as soon as it is possible into the society.
But when countries don't want to take them in, when you have countries that don't want to have to take in any of the migrants, how do you get that solidarity from Europe that everyone seems to love talking about? How do you actually solve it? It is a big problem because they just push people around amongst themselves.
Yes, and we have to have some common strategy because European Union is not just supermarket when you come and take what you want, but you have to share some responsibilities and also values.
So you say you want to stop wars?
Definitely, yes.
How are you going to do that?
Look, I was born in Sarajevo. Probably you all know that it is a hero town. During the Balkan Wars, it was under occupation for 4 years. And okay, I was born in mixed marriage, so all my life I live in Slovenia. But I lost, in these 4 years, half of my family. And I can tell you, from my own experience, that war will not solve anything, never, ever.
No, but that's not the question. You said we need to stop war.
Yes.
How can you do that?
With diplomacy, of course.
But diplomacy in many of these situations has not worked to date.
This is the reason probably why.
So that is why the wars, some of them have lasted longer than a decade. I don't understand how simple diplomacy is going to end wars in places like Yemen and Syria and in the Congo.
So I will ask you one question. So why Germany and France want to export a lot of weapons and earn on other people's misery? Okay. They can export something good. They can build some factories and then it would be some kind of diplomacy.
Okay, and what about Russia exporting those weapons?
Yeah, the same question.
Okay, let's go to another audience member here and get a question from Fredrik Goldner. So, Fredrik, what is your question?
Yeah, so even though a treaty revision might seem unrealistic right now, would you in principle and would the European left in principle support the vision of a European federation or even a European republic? Or do you think it would be better to have a Europe of nations to tackle social issues? Thank you.
Well, we have to keep nations because this is what makes us different. Our culture, different languages and culture, but we need to have some common values, and that's it. And I think if we will establish some common social security and equality in between the nations, it would be much easier to live together.
So you want more Europe?
Definitely more Europe, but more different Europe. Because now we all know that this Europe is not really equal and justice. Europe of 2 speeds. It's hiding Europe of company owners in center and Europe of cheap labor on periphery.
But isn't it the fact, that the Europe economies are all very different? Hence, you have 2 speeds. Some just develop faster, some develop. So how do you actually want to address that problem and make economies which are completely different to go at the same speed?
Yes, that's what I mentioned with the universal minimum wages. Because if everybody can live from their work, it will be much easier.
But that doesn't address that question because those wages will still be significantly lower in Romania or Bulgaria than they will be in Sweden.
But the costs are lower in Romania.
Just coming back to this question about European values, are they Christian values?
Well, some of them, mostly right-wingers, they say For example, Manfred Weber, when he was in Slovenia, he said, "Hello, Slovenia, it's very nice to be here. The only thing what is common in all small villages is that Christian church is in the middle of every village." Okay, European Union, some of them, they think it's built on Christian values, but I think it is built on anti-fascism, because after the Second World War, we finally find out that it is the peace what we want to keep inside of Europe.
OK, well, there you go. Maybe you've got a view on that. Christian Europe, whether you think also on this issue of Crimea there should be a second referendum. What are you thinking? What are you saying at home? Let's go over to a social media hub, find out with Jack and Maeve for the very latest reaction to what viewers are hearing.
We've actually had a Facebook comment on that very issue, that Crimean issue. Joanne is saying, why should Ukrainians believe in the EU after Violeta Tomic's answer about Crimea? Interestingly as well, one of the big, obviously, contemporaneous issues is Venezuela right now, with everything that's going on over there. We're following the tweets here. Secretary of State of the United States, Mike Pompeo, he is saying that the interim president announced the start of Operación Libertad and the US government fully supports the Venezuelan people in their quest for freedom and democracy. And the European Parliament President, Antonio Tajani, he says that this marks a historic moment for the return to democracy and has celebrated the release of Leopoldo Lopez, a very prominent figure in the Venezuelan opposition.
And we've been asking, in fact, our viewers ahead of this programme what role they believe the European Union should take when it comes to Venezuela. We're all about all views and hearing all opinions here at Euronews. And Caesar wrote in saying, well, nothing. The EU should not interfere in the domestic ongoings or Venezuela or any other nation, including their own member states. But meanwhile, Victoria, she says, well, if the EU defends human rights, it should have intervened a long time ago. Not taking sides, but trying to help through contacts with neighbouring countries like Colombia, where many refugees go. So our question tonight to Violeta Tomic is, what role, if you were Commission President, would you take when it comes to Juan Guaidó and Nicolás Maduro?
There you go. So how would you deal with Venezuela?
Well, I'm strongly against any interference from Europe or especially from USA. And Antonio Tajani is always on the wrong side of history. Also, it was on the border with Italy and my country, Slovenia, when he supported Mussolini, who was fascist.
Okay. No, but let's come back to Venezuela, just briefly in this, because you know what, I could have almost predicted your answer to that question. And the reason is that left-wing socialist communist politicians will always, irrespective of what a government does, if they are off the left, they think they should be left alone. Venezuela being the perfect example. If it was a right-wing government doing what it's doing to its people, you would be the first person saying it was an outrage. And because he's off the left, you think the EU should stay out.
Do you agree with that?
No, not at all. Always EU should stay out. But I will turn your question, if it will be right and the right person for Donald Trump, then they will have no sanctions, and people who has a biggest amount of oil in the earth and a lot of gold would not suffer hunger.
Okay.
But they suffer hunger because of sanctions of USA.
So just yes or no before we go to our next question. Intervention for you is off limits, like no intervention from the EU in any case?
No.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Okay, so do get in touch because we're waiting for all of your comments and your questions. And let's see what Violeta Tomic's colleagues really think of her. Here are some personal reflections that they sent to us. Let's take a look.
Brave, active and fair.
Creative, persistent, decisive.
Energetic, outgoing and creative.
Creative, feminist, class struggle.
Friendly, she's warm and she's very empathic.
The greatest strength is social empathy.
Whatever it takes, she will always stand on the side with the underdogs, with the weak, and confront the power.
She's a real fighter, that she never gives up.
She doesn't fear anything.
She never gives up.
She goes through.
she's not part of European political establishment. But on the other hand, that's also a strength.
Her weakness might be that she's self-critique.
Sometimes she forgets how to rest, how to just disconnect, have time off, and not worry that if she will not be present, the world will fall apart.
We now and then need some breaks.
I think she's sometimes a little bit impatient.
We often go together picking up mushrooms or other edible wild plants. She is really good in knowing all of that.
I met Violeta Tomic first time in my life in the desert.
She loves animals.
She adopted one amazing dog. His name is Buddha, and so a lot of times we go together with my two dogs to the woods.
I asked her how come that someone into arts, into culture, a show business woman like you, how come that you entered the political sphere? And she answered, well, €1 less spent for war is €1 more for culture.
So a star of the stage that doesn't give up on politics, constantly working.
I think that was really interesting. Everyone says you're a fighter, you're not going to give up. And I think I want to broaden that to the left in general, the far left. Why has it been so hard? Why does it always have to be a fight to get your ideas out there?
We are only political group who doesn't want to fight. We are for peaceful politics, and we think that we are aggressive if we say don't sell the weapons, don't interfere to other countries. We are for peaceful solutions.
Okay, we have more questions for you, so let's go to another studio audience from Frederick from the Yale University. What is your question?
Thank you. As mentioned, the European left opposes NATO, and the European left has also opposed several initiatives regarding European defense. You mentioned that the European left wants peaceful solutions. The question would be, which means would you use to protect and keep Europe safe from external threats that still exist and that might come into Europe or might reach Europe despite the good intentions or the initiatives of the Europeans?
Yes, thank you for this question. It's very interesting. But NATO, we are always for some safety, military or police forces to protect us. But we are opposing any interfering outside of European Union, because what it concerns us to what is going on, whenever we were giving around some kind of democracy, we destroyed the nations. Like in Libya, Afghanistan, whenever they were trying to give democracy, they found oil. Actually, it is just a war for resources, for oil, and people have to run.
Just to follow on Frederick's question, it's that if you're against NATO or even a European army, or indeed, if the threat does come to Europe's door, who is going to protect Europe? I think that's the question. So how will you protect yourself from an actual threat if you don't have military, if it were to go to that level?
Yes, military force under United Nations.
Okay.
Military force under the United Nations who seem unable to reach an agreement, potentially when the aggressor has a veto. You talk about interference a lot. You don't want Europe to interfere elsewhere in the world. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
But you want Europe to diplomatically interfere?
No, diplomatic interference is not interference, but to find the peaceful solutions. Okay. Because how can we save the world and climate goals if we will just fight all the time? Because we know that weapons is terribly strong.
It's not about fighting. It's if you're trying to reach a diplomatic solution to a problem, what's your stick? How do you get someone to listen to what you've got to say? If you're not prepared to use sanctions, if you're not prepared to use the threats of the use of weapons, how will you get people to listen? Why would they listen to you?
Do you think that they will listen to you if you put the gun on their head? I don't believe in this.
Okay.
If you respect other humans, they will respect you. That's what I believe in. So
just very quickly on that, on peaceful means, how would you get the UK and France to give up their nuclear weapons?
How?
Yes. If you say we should all be peaceful, then tell the UK and France to give up their nuclear weapons. How will you do that?
Well, we have to convince them somehow to stop with this military competition. Because we are again in the time of Cold War.
But
we
Violeta,
thought it is finished.
This doesn't come back to the essence of the problem that people have with on the left, is that the ideas in principle sound great, but in reality, almost unachievable.
When I start to do politics, somebody told me, very clever guy as you are, yes, you have very good ideas, but it is possible just after the Third World War. And I said, why we need to have a terrible, destroyable war to wake up and to try to save humanity? Why we are so stupid that we cannot make difference now, before catastrophe?
OK, well, let's move on, because as I say, this is all about you tonight. We've got another question, and it comes from Kim, who is in Germany. Let's have a listen.
If you would become president of the European Commission, what's on your agenda for young people that has an impact on the next generations?
So how would you deal with what is your strategy for young people for the next generation?
Yes, strategy for young people is very... it goes together with strategy to save the planet and ecological issue, because the future is yours. So we propose a Green New Deal for European Union, which will start to green economy and invest funds in green infrastructure, and also invest in investigation about green technologies and build green infrastructure, and also fast train connections and so on. It will be finally a lot of jobs for young, especially well-educated people, because I think now European Union has Erasmus+. It is a good thing, but what after? We have high-educated people who cannot find the jobs, so they work some as a waitress for 3 or 5 euros per hour, and it is not very good start for their career. And also they need to have access to housing, because we all want that our kids move away and to live their own lives.
All right. I mean, we would love you to join into this discussion and see your reaction to what Ms. Tomic has been saying here. So Maeve and Jack have been tracking all of your reactions on social this hour. So let's check in with them again. What do you have?
Thanks, Tessa. Well, lots of people have been weighing in and giving their 2 pence over the last 30 minutes or so. We've got James reminding the candidate there on the couch that the EU's fundamental values are respect for human rights, equality and the rule of law. And then we have hello from Damien, who's watching from Tomic's home country of Slovenia, and he's pretty curious about her views on Brexit.
We've also had some discussions on social media, keep them coming in, regarding Violeta Tomic's positions on business and the economy. Theodore in Budapest, he's been asking whether you believe that European champions should be created by merging big European companies. And Nico Amory here, who is a student in Maastricht, he wants to know, what is your plan to prevent the emergence of another financial crisis in Europe?
Well, there we go. What is the plan?
Yes, I like the last question. It is what I mentioned before. With Green New Deal, we will prevent another possible financial crisis in Europe, because we know that, for example, China, with this very fast growing country, they had no financial crisis because of investments. What we need is not austerity, but investments.
OK. All right. We will switch gears a little bit here. There's a little game that we like to play here on the program. It is, I will say something. It's a word association game. I will say something, and you will tell me the first word that comes to your mind. OK? Let's start. Capitalism.
Bad.
The euro.
Common.
OK.
Well, I think that's definitely true.
OK. Jean-Claude Juncker.
Old.
Donald Trump.
No.
No. Yanis Varoufakis.
Interesting.
Okay, he's had interesting things to say as well. All right, communism.
One of the systems.
Yellow vests.
Revolt.
Celebrity turned politicians.
It happens.
Okay. And fake news.
Ugly.
Okay, all right.
Would you, just on this point, would you describe yourself as a communist?
No.
How would you describe yourself?
I'm socialist. It is a big difference. We never lived in Soviet Union under the Iron Curtain, and the difference between Slovenia and Slovakia, this campaign is very important for me, that you will finally find my country on the map of European Union. It is Slovenia, the northern part of previous Yugoslavia. We had special type of socialism, which has a lot of very good things. So, after re-establishing capitalism, we lost a lot of common and social...
Sounds like you missed the USSR.
I never been in USSR. How can you cannot get it?
No, but I don't mean that, but as in like in that system of governments.
We have to admit that Yugoslavia said no to USSR in '57. And it is like Antonio Tajani comes to our border and say, long live Italian Eastern Dalmatia. This guy couldn't be president of this parliament because this was occupation forces fascists who said the same thing as Antonio Tajani.
I think it's very clear you're not a big fan of
No,
Mr. Tajani, but there you go. Anyway,
well.
just to remind you, you're watching Raw Questions here on Euronews. The European left's leading candidate, Violeta Tomic, is in the hot seat tonight. She's still here, and you've still got time to send in your questions. We want to hear from you. All the ways of getting in touch are on your screen. Please do send us an email. If you're on social media, use the hashtag #RawPolitics.
Okay, so we have our next question, which came in through our WhatsApp. So it comes from Portugal, and this person wants to know, when will we see a European nationality for those of us who wish to be European without being subject to an individual country? A European nationality, what do you think of that?
Yes, I think it is possible, and it's not a bad idea. Because during the Yugoslavia times, I will again mention, but I'm not Yugo-nostalgic. I'm just comparing because I lived first 30 years in different system when we have a lot of democracy, by the way. And maybe you have to... Okay. And of course, we had nationalities. We had Yugoslavian nationality and also others. And when it falls apart, it was very important which nationality you are now. So during the night, we erased 25,000 people. And that's what I'm concerned about UK now.
So, but what about this concept of a European nationality? Do you think it's better to say I'm European rather than I'm French, I'm German, I'm Belgian? Is that an idea that you will push forward?
It could be as a possibility. Why not?
Are you concerned that lots of people don't feel very European? Because we are seeing this rise of nationalism again. Well, why do you think that since the crash, the crisis that you've talked about a lot, that actually support, even amongst working class people, seems to be going to the right as a solution to this,
rather
than
not
to you guys on the left? Why do you think that is?
History is repeating itself, and we have to learn something from the history, or we will have to face it again. In 30s of previous century, it was the same. First economic crisis and then Second World War, because people are so frustrated, so angry, because they cannot survive the month. And on the other hand, you have extremely rich people. While during the economic crisis we were tightening our belts, the number of billionaires doubled. So the far right harvests success from those who have a feeling that neoliberal globalization is leaving them behind. So neoliberals middle, neoliberal capitalism and far right populism are just two sides of the same coin.
OK, well, what do you think about that? We are going to find out, because we're going to go for one last visit to the social media hub and join Jack and Maeve.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, well, one of the things that you've been talking about that's generated some conversations on our Facebook live feed regards this referendum in Crimea. A lot of people, including Serge Orlov, saying that there's absolutely no possibility of that happening. Now, also over here in the social media hub, we're using CrowdTangle to assess the Spitzenkandidates' success, the social media race, essentially, on Facebook. We're doing it with everyone that we're having on the sofa, and you can see here, Violeta Tomic, your Facebook posts, the traction that they're generating, comments, etc. You're only getting about 1% of the traction at the moment. It's not too bad when you look at it, because Manfred Weber, the lead party currently in the European Parliament, he's still only on 1% as well.
And it's a pretty similar picture when it comes to your political group as well. It's right down at the bottom of the league. But not to worry, there's a couple of weeks still to go to those elections. They're, of course, taking place between the 23rd and the 26th of May. And many people are admiring your audacity for leaving the theatre to join politics.
I think that's social media, very interesting. And also your push to find your strategy for young people. What is your social media strategy? This is the best way to reach out to people.
Isn't that the point that one of the reasons the right might be doing so well is because they're actually very good at
how to use social media.
And you guys are not.
That's true, because, you know, for example, Viktor Orban owns a lot of media in my country. And can you imagine? Of course, he's good, because the right-wingers are often supported by corporations and very, very rich people to serve their interests.
But the social media is out there for the left to use as well. So what would you do? What is your strategy?
Well, I had to explain to you that, for example, Viktor Orban has his own TV station. And
but you've got Twitter. Yeah. Why don't you tweet more?
We tweet as much as we could, but I have just two hands, you know, and other people who has money follow the money, because money talks. They can hire a lot of people to tweet for them. That's a difference.
Okay, well, I also have just two hands. Okay, now, before we go tonight, let's close, as always, with our raw moment. Violeta Tomic blasting out her campaign message in Strasbourg earlier this month alongside her co-candidate Nico Coué. Let's take a look.
We are here to show new hope for the Europe, to opposite of the neoliberal middle politics and far-right populism. European left is bringing forward different policies which will establish more democracy, more social rights and more environmental consciousness.
You're doing most of the talking there. Are you enjoying the campaign?
Well, I'm quite tired, I have to admit, because I have to travel a lot, and I'm doing campaign in Slovenia as well. So it's very tired.
There's a lot more work to do, you think?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I didn't have a free day for a long, long time.
It is interesting. I think politicians get an awful lot of flack sometimes, but it's actually a very tough business.
It is very tough.
Yes, it is tough.
Tougher than TV, would you say?
Yes, definitely tougher, because if you are doing on TV, you have your show once a week, everybody is running around you, and makeup artists, and they dress you, and you're nice and beautiful, and they pay you, and you don't need to argue all the time. Everybody loves you.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, that is pretty much it. Don't forget, though, you can join us in a couple of weeks' time here on Euronews. We'll be talking to Guy Verhofstadt, the candidate for the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe. That's on May 13th at 4 p.m. Brussels time. Do join us then. Meantime, please do get in touch and ask your questions to him.
And thank you to our audience and, of course, to Ms. Tomic for being with us on the program. Have a good evening.
Thanks for watching. Good night.
Thank you.
This week on Euronews.
Find out why commercial space travel may soon become more affordable, according to Virgin Galactic chief Sir Richard Branson, and get the lowdown on how millennials are keeping advertisers on their toes in this digital age. Plus, keep tabs on Trump's transatlantic trade tussle. Will the EU bite back? That's in Business Line this week on Euronews and Euronews.com.